the subject matter today, I'm going to go over, I'm going to start broad and work pretty deep. And I do want to save some time to go over, for those of you who took the time management analysis, give you a broad overview of the report, because it's 12 pages. There's a lot in there. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions too. So let me, slide this up a little bit. So what I want to accomplish today in our discussion is three things. I want to give you a definition of time management. I'm going to give you the Kairos management definition of time management, because I think it's important for you to adopt some type of definition and structure as you manage your time. Then we'll go through time management routines, starting again very broadly and working our way to very specific information. And then we'll finish up giving you an overview of the time management analysis and any questions that you might have. So let me dive in really quick and let's give you the definition of time management. And it's pretty simple. It is the right planning along with the right process to control productivity. So of that definition, you just need to remember those three words: planning, process, and control. Planning is what you foundationally do up front. You need to invest time to say, how am I going to accomplish a particular activity, project, or assignment that's given to me? So once you developed a plan, process is just another word for execution. So how am I going to go execute or finish the plan that I have established? And control is the most important of the three because it's your control. You need to be proactive. You need to be the one, wherever you can, to control your schedule. And I know that can be tough when you've got a boss who's giving you a bunch of things to do, when things come at you unexpected. But that's where the more you plan and process, the easier it is to control. The better able you are to control, the easier it is to plan and process. So the three work together to cohesively help you be more efficient with your time. Now, there are, with that definition of process, of planning, process, and control, this might look familiar to you for those of you who took the TMA and got your results, is that there are 5 areas of time management, 5 categories, you might say. There's planning, task management, focus, organization, and personal care. And we're going to talk about some elements of these as you integrate them into routines. But the idea behind these 5 is that there's clear areas that they're involved in planning, process, and control. And so if you work all 5 of these well, then your planning, process, and control is also working well. So those 5 categories are the areas that I ask my clients to focus on to improve their time management. So as I mentioned, many of you, I was telling Camille, I think we've got now 30 people who have taken the time management analysis. So excellent on that. The basis for how I work with people on time management comes from that tool, because it helps identify objectively where there can be opportunities in people's time management. In those 5 areas, you answered 20 questions when you took the TMA, or you answered 20 scenarios. They were really scenarios, not in statements. Each one of those scenarios that you answered is actually a section tied back to one of those 5 areas. And they all wrap up into a full time management strategy. So how does this then play into routines? Well, we're going to talk about the areas that are circled in red, because those are really the most directly tied to establishing solid routines for you. It'll be a lot in the planning section with those particular 5 categories, 2 areas in task management or task administration, and that's having a task list and prioritizing them. The calendar is the foundational piece for time management. If you're not using a calendar, you're going to have a hard time establishing good time management practices. And then I'm going to spend and actually start talking about personal care, because routines established in personal care help routines so much in the other avenue and aspects of time management. So we won't cover all 20, but we'll cover these areas here that are highlighted that are important and related to routine time management. So again, these are the 11 areas we'll talk about and go through as part of what it is to be tied to routines. I'm going to start with sleep. And you might be saying, sleep? This guy doesn't even know what kind of life I lead. 8 hours. What is he, crazy? So sleep in this, first of all, 29% of you who took the time management analysis agree or strongly agree that you get 8 hours of sleep. So really the vast majority of you are not getting technically enough sleep. So what does that mean? Let me give you a couple of examples. Jeff Bezos, who's the owner of Amazon, founder of Amazon, and then Elon Musk, who we all know with Tesla and his attempt to potentially buy Twitter. These two gentlemen are they're billionaires, and their approach to time management is very different, except in one area. They both very much try to get consistent sleep. Jeff Bezos is pretty much set on 8 hours of sleep. That's part of his time management regimen, and it's important to him to get the 8 hours. Now, if 8 hours is too much, and it's just like my life doesn't allow for that right now, Elon Musk, who works 80 to 100 hours a week, gets 6 hours a week, 6 hours a night sleep. He goes to bed at 1 o'clock and gets up at 7. So if you can't do the Jeff Bezos version, then try to start a routine, a sleep routine of 6 hours a week with Elon Musk, because good sleep is good for your health. It helps your energy and provides you with the necessary focus to work on your time management. The second area under personal care, and one that I think is a really good important routine to develop, and that's having a formal break in the day. And now 64% of you agreed or strongly agreed that you take at least one break during the day, and good for you for that. The idea behind a personal break or a break that you do is to get up and leave the spot that you're working at, to give your brain a change of environment. So a break is, if you work in front of a computer, the break is not to then whip out your phone or to go on social media for 15 minutes and review social media. It's actually to get up and step away from the area that you're at. My routine is to take my dog for a walk. That's one of my breaks that I take. And so it gets me away from the desk, and it gets me in a different environment to come back and be more focused. And then finally, another routine of which 39% of you, about 4 in 10 who took the assessment, regularly exercise. The importance here is 30 minutes, at least 30 minutes a day, in some form to try to get your heart rate up. So one of the things that we all get stuck in our job is when stressful times happen, our heart rate accelerates and it has a hard time coming down in stress. What exercise does for you is it pushes your heart rate up and brings it back down more normally, so that during times of stress, your body's trained to do that. It brings its heart rate up and down. Now, I'm going to put a big disclaimer out there. I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV. Whatever regimen you do related to your personal health, I highly recommend you talk to a personal trainer if you have a trainer, or if you know someone who's a trainer, a nutritionist, or your doctor. They'll help set the right regimen for you. But I really think it's important that the first step in routines these are fairly easy ones, is to establish personal care. So we've talked about the 3 personal care aspects related to routines. The next step I want to talk about is the routines of personal goals. And personal goals is actually a very broad aspect. And here's why. A typical personal goal revolves around what you want to accomplish yourself, tied to the personal side of your life. So for example, I want to run a marathon next year. And no, I don't. That's just an example I'm using. So I want to run a marathon next year. You have to invest the time to understand what are the mechanics that you have to do to train. What are the right shoes? Where do I train? How do I train? How long am I going to have to train to be able to even run a marathon? So that's a personal goal. A career personal goal is something different. Let's say you want to be a manager at the place you work at in 2 years. Well, you've got to decide and figure out what you personally have to do within the work environment, getting the normal things that you need to get done tied to your job, and figure out what are the additional things that I need to either learn or understand in order to be promoted to a manager. So both are personal goals. One is just what you're doing personally. The other is what you're doing from a professional standpoint to help yourself. And setting those goals are usually longer term goals. They could be, like I said, a 2-year goal to get promoted as a manager. There's a lot of thought processes and changes that are going to happen, but it is definitely something that's occurring out into the future. All right, so then we've done that element of it. Now what I want to do is talk a little bit about executional issues more, and that's using a calendar. Now, I love Teamworks and what they're doing, because this is an area, obviously, that's a focus area for you, because the scores here at 90% who agree or strongly agree that they use a calendar. I can tell you right now, I've done hundreds of time management analysis. The average is about 50%. So this group, kudos to you all on how good you use a calendar. What I want to do is talk a little bit, and I'll move this over, about what I see are common calendar challenges. So this is a fictitious calendar, but this is typically what I see when I work with clients. I say, show me your calendar. And the calendar is populated with a variety of meetings that either that person creates for them and others, or that's created for them. There could be some blocks of personal time that are related to that, but usually there are these huge gaps of time in a calendar. And so what happens there is, when I ask, so what are you doing in that time? Well, I'm going to work on some tasks and projects that I have planned. Well, typically what happens, if you work in an environment where people can see your calendar, they fill your calendar with stuff that you're kind of like, oh, wow, I had planned to work on X item. Now I've got to go sit in a meeting I really don't think I need to be a part of. Or your boss comes in and says, hey, I'm going to give you 3 or 4 things I need you to get done. So what you want to do, and this may seem like overkill, but you really want your calendar to look like this. And what I mean by this is you have planned every hour, knowing that that hour is going to change and your calendar will change. Also, what you want to do is color code your calendar. So in this case, the green areas are my personal time. And again, this is a fictitious calendar. The green areas are your personal time. And they could be green in here, like if you have an appointment, like I've got to go take my child to the doctor, or I've got to go do something, you get approval from your employer, that sort of thing. If you're in school, you put your time here would be the time you're in class and the time you need to study. So you fill in every hour, knowing that there will be adjustments to it, but it becomes a routine. It disciplines you to say, I am going to, again, going back to that process and control and planning, I'm going to plan out my calendar. The process is to monitor it, and the control is I'm going to begin to really understand what's important to me. So you want to set this up. And by the way, I used a Google Calendar here. You can do the same thing in Outlook or an Apple Calendar. I just saw many of you had Google extensions. And so I thought this is probably the most common. So if you have an email set up on Google, you can use the calendar within Google. If you if your employer requires you to use a calendar, I would ask permission from your employer if you can put your personal items on here. And I know many of us tie that back to our electronic devices like our phone and other things, or we may manage our calendar exclusively from our phone. So if you are going to use your employer's, ask permission. If you think that's a problem, then use your personal calendar and duplicate over any events that happen at work, copy your personal email and put them over here. But really the idea is you want your calendar to be the foundational tool for your time management. And it takes time to do this. I have on Fridays for me, a Friday morning for me, I have 2 hours devoted to planning my next 2 weeks. And that's the other thing that I would ask you to do is you go out 2 weeks on your calendar. The first week is pretty solid. The second week is what I call wet cement. There's a foundation to it, but you know it's going to change. But again, plan your time accordingly so that you've got pretty much every hour blocked out so you know what you're doing. So try that. This is one of these, maybe try a little bit, try a day. You don't have to try everything all at once, but the routine is start something, whether you plan your weekends, see how that goes, then start the weekend. But I think it's extremely important that is a part of your time management strategy. I already talked about planning ahead. Again, my approach is you plan 2 weeks ahead, at least, and then you work that from the updates that you need to do relative to what's happening.
Designated outdoor assembly area. Do not use the elevators. Walk to the nearest stairway exit. Designated outdoor assembly area.
I am so sorry.
No.
Yeah.
There we go. Hope everything's okay. That didn't sound good. Hopefully everything's okay. All right. So then the next thing that we want to get into is task planning and task management. And in this case, the first thing you want to do is maintain a list. Now, my recommendation is you maintain an electronic list because it's more robust. However, I know plenty of people who manage off of a journal or some other area for managing their tasks. That's great. My rule of thumb as a coach and a consultant to people as it relates to time management, as long as it works for you, you're meeting your obligations, you're completing what you need to do on time, I'm not going to bug you about the execution or the process. I'm going to focus more on the planning and how you control over that. But I am going to draw the calendar back over here for a second, because one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, again, Microsoft Outlook, I know that Apple software has the same thing, and Google obviously does too. They have built into the calendar process a task management section for you. And what's cool about what Google does is they actually put the tasks up there on the day that you're working. So as you establish your task list, again, my recommendation is it's both personal and professional. So if you've got things to do at work that are assigned that need to be done, great, get them done, put them on there. But also if you have personal things, like what I have to do, I've got to finish 3 things for your studies. You can put that, list those out here too. You can set dates related around them. You can also create subtasks. So if you've got a large project with a variety of smaller tasks associated with that, you can set it up that way. But I think it's really a neat thing that's offered. Microsoft does the exact same thing, by the way. that you can line them up here so that you've got all your tasks in one location tied back to your calendar. Because what you may want to do is, if I've got three important tasks that are due on Tuesday the 20th, I may want to adjust my calendar and block off some time that says specifically, I need to do my tasks at this particular time. So maintaining a list, my preference is electronic, but whatever works for you, as long as you're getting it done on time and meeting the needs. Oops. Now the next thing that you want to do with your tasks is prioritize those tasks. So a common thing that happens with people is they line up all their tasks really well. Now let's say they've got 10 tasks that are due today. They start at the top of the tasks list and they work their way to the bottom. And at the end of the day, they got 8 tasks done and they have 2 remaining. And they're thinking, pretty good, I got 80% done. Well, the last 2 were your most important tasks. And what happens is you then have to figure out, how am I going to do those on other days? So a very, very important routine to establish in task management is to immediately prioritize at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day for the next day, what are the absolute must tasks that I need to complete in order for my day to end well? And again, if it's only 2 out of 10 tasks, great. That way you don't beat yourself up. If you're like, oh, I got those 8 tests done, but man, I have to go back to my boss to say I'm going to be late with this particular assignment that you gave me because I ended up working lower level tasks. So the routine here is prioritize those tasks, get the important ones done, and don't beat yourself up if the lower level tasks aren't done that day. So we've covered right now personal care. We've covered your goals, the idea of calendar management and task management. Now we want to talk about some further execution issues. And this relates firstly about meetings. So as you get going in your career, and think of meetings right now, if you're going to school, you can interdisperse your class studies in that. But as you head out into the business world or are in the business world, pretty much any occupation that you have, there's going to be some time devoted to meetings, even if they're quick meetings or whatever, but meetings are an essential part of what it is. So whether class studies or meetings, the important thing is for you to be prepared. And the routine is to invest time before you show up either to the class or that meeting, whether the materials, if there were materials that were given out to you beforehand, make sure that you've read up on those materials. If you're the leading a meeting, be the subject matter expert before you walk in that meeting. So you are ready and prepared to answer questions, to give out the information. So preparation is so, so important. It needs to be a routine now while you're in school, and if you're in the business world and head out into the business world. So, so important. Now, the great part about it is in this area, again, 82% of you understand the importance of meetings and are on top of that. So again, kudos to this group. That's much higher than the average of the clients that I work with. The other element to this, and for those of you still in school, sometimes, particularly in a lecture class, it's not easy to quote participate. However, where you can, be prepared to participate because it helps you retain information better. For those of you in the business world and in that dynamic, participation, whether you're there as a participant or a leader, obviously if you're a leader, you got to participate because you're leading the meeting. But if you're sitting there in a meeting, be ready to ensure that the goals of the meeting were met, that you're getting out of the meeting what you need to get. And if you're not, respectfully ask questions or respectfully say, hey, can you clarify this particular point? You're participating, I can assure you, most everybody who is a facilitator of a meeting is going to appreciate it when somebody says, hey, can you stop, clarify this for a minute? So where appropriate, be ready to participate. And then again, on time. It is so important. If you're leading the meeting, that's not an option. You really need to be there beforehand. You know, for example, like Camilla was on a good before 5 minutes, but maybe 10 minutes beforehand, 5 to 10 minutes, she was already ready to go. And so that's important when you kick off a meeting, you're on time. And if you're the leader, you really need to be there beforehand. And again, another strong area, another 82% that you as a group, everyone takes that very, very seriously. So meeting routines of preparation, participation, and being on time, very, very important. Now, completing assignments, you might say, great, this is really pretty obvious, Dave, thanks. So let me go a little deeper here on this. If you commit to doing something, own it. Too many times, if you're assigned something or you choose to do something, it can go away. And I've had this in my career where I've committed to something and I don't get to it. And I'm kind of hopeful that the boss maybe doesn't remember. Sometimes they didn't, sometimes they did. What happens though, eventually it comes back to bite you. So the idea behind this philosophy and this routine here is that you're going to commit yourself to completing that task. And again, this is a really, really high score of 92% strongly or agree that it's important to complete assignments. So if you go and embark on either committing to your boss or your boss gives you a deadline or your teacher says this paper's due, then it comes down to the planning, process, and control again. I'm going to plan what I need to do to complete that assignment, to understand how to execute it. I'm going to make sure I control it. And if the assignment due date's coming up and I'm not going to meet that obligation, I proactively, either if it's my personal assignment, I reassess, go back and replan, set a new process, and be diligent to control that. Or I go back to the person who assigned me that, again, before the due date to say, I don't think I'm going to be able to meet this. Can we talk about some alternative timeframes, replan this, and go through? So I have worked myself through a variety of routine established time management options for you. My suggestion is to not go after all these at one time, unless you're doing them well. I mean, if you're doing it well, awesome. If not, my suggestion is pick one right now that you feel most comfortable trying to establish a routine. I go back to the personal care aspects to start there because those are probably the easiest. However, any one of those, start with that and establish till you feel comfortable that that becomes ingrained as a habit or a routine. Then add others to it. And you can reference, if you're like, well, not sure where to start, and you've taken the time management analysis, you can reference the areas on that report that maybe you didn't score as high or answer as high as some of the other areas there. So you can use that as a guide and a starting point for what you can do to establish time managed routines. Now, an element behind this, and as you establish a routine, inevitably, you're going to lose focus. And focus, again, is one of those time management categories that I work with clients on and are in the report that you received. In focus, what kills momentum and what will stop routine is if you procrastinate. And procrastination is usually because you're trying to do too much in too short of a period of time. So if you find you're establishing a routine and you're like, I'm going to exercise tomorrow, I'm going to keep pushing that off. Maybe if you say your exercise routine is, I'm going to exercise for an hour, maybe you need to just start exercising for 10 minutes. I'm going to go out and I'm going to jog around the block, because what that'll do is that 10-minute chunk might keep you from procrastinating versus to say, I'm going to dedicate an hour. So if you're having a hard time establishing routines, break the routine down into smaller chunks. That ties right into motivation. So again, if you're going to say, tomorrow I'm going to go run a marathon. Well, I haven't trained for the marathon. I can tell you right now, there's no motivation for me to get up tomorrow to go try to run a marathon because I haven't done any routine work beforehand. The idea also of saying no is more about, if I find I'm not doing what I need to do, you say no to yourself. Okay, listen, I keep delaying. I'm not doing this. No, I have got to go back and handle this particular area. Then distractions are always a killer. You know, I'm going to go binge watch the latest Netflix series that just came out in lieu of exercising because I think I'm going to enjoy myself better. Okay, you've got to be disciplined not to be distracted by that and go do whatever else activity you have planned. Interruptions are another thing. If you're going to establish routines, don't do it during a busy time in your life or a busy time during the day. It's going to be harder to do those routines. Start with a routine in more of a quieter time in your life so you're not going to be potentially interrupted as much. And the old idea, talk is cheap, action speaks louder than words. I'm going to exercise tomorrow. Then tomorrow you're going to say, I'm going to exercise the next day. And then I don't have the right shoes to run, so I've got to wait to get the right shoes. And then you get the right shoes and you say, yeah, but you know what? All I've got are cotton heavy t-shirts. I'm going to sweat too much. I got to go get performance related clothing. Stop talking, just start producing. So as you establish routines, you're going to lose focus, recognize that, and come back to that to keep those routines going.